Thank you. Thank you. Greetings to everybody. Good morning, members of the media. And thank you for attending this press conference at short notice. I appreciate your presence and your willingness to hear directly from me as the chairperson of the Section 22 Committee established to investigate abuses within the Christian sector. Before I proceed, allow me to acknowledge and introduce those who are seated with me today and who will, if necessary, assist in responding to questions which you may ask. Maybe we'll do the introductions later. My presentation is as this topic, the state of the church in South Africa. Important update on the CRL state versus the Christian church in the context of the Section 22 Committee. We all know there are some very unclear things going on between the Christian church and the CRL, maybe also the state. So I'm here to explain those and to give you a background of what happened. And then after that, I will also announce that the best thing I can do is really to resign from the CRL, which I will do, I've done already. I've called this press conference because I have decided that it has become necessary in the interest of transparency, constitutional accountability, and personal integrity of myself to resign as chairperson of the Section 22 Committee of the Christian sector of the CRL Rights Commission. And I feel that I need to explain the circumstances under which I'm resigning. To give you some background, I had believed I was approached to chair the Section 22 Committee because of my background and experience at the intersection of culture, religion, governance, and scholarship. I must also say maybe also linguistics, because I'm an author of books in Zulu and in English as well. So it's a field that I know very well. I was present at and co-organized the 1998 National Conference that gave conceptual birth to what later became known as the CRL Rights Commission, at a time when I served as Deputy Director General for Arts and Culture in the Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology. Although the Act was passed in 2002, the conceptualization had started in that conference on the 24th of September, 1998. I am an ordained Christian minister, a lifelong churchman, an academic who has spent decades studying religion, culture, theology, governance, and constitutional democracy. I have served both the church and the state, and I have always sought to do so with fidelity, balance, and integrity. It was therefore not surprising to me that I was approached as an outsider to the Commission, precisely because I was not embedded in its internal affairs and because I could bring objectively an independent, scholarly, and faith-rooted perspective to a highly sensitive national task. My appointment was confirmed in writing on 25 April, and it started being operational on the 15th of April, 2025. And it was clear. I was going to chair the Section 22 Committee to call and preside over its meetings independently and to conduct extensive research into abuses within the Christian religious sector with a view to protecting religious freedom, but not undermine it. I wish to emphasize that there was no reference whatsoever in my letter of appointment to the development of a legislative framework or to any form of state control of the Christian church and religion in South Africa. On the contrary, my understanding was that the task before me and the Section 22 Committee was to explore self-regulation grounded in Scripture, in church history, also grounded in sound theology, and the lived experiences of Christian communities in South Africa, which are very diverse. I therefore approach this task as an academic because when confronted with complex and sensitive mandate, one does not work in isolation. I conducted extensive research and shared draft papers with theologians, church leaders, and scholars across denominations so that they could give me a feedback if my thinking was on the right or not. I did so openly and transparently because this is how scholarship works. Ideas are always tested and critiqued before they become, accepted as facts. I also believe that this process had to win the confidence of the Christian church and not to undermine the Christian church. I come now to the issues of the Section 22 Committee. I need to state for the record that from the outset I have been concerned about perceived irregularities in the Section 22 Committee. To this day, I do not know whether the Section 22 Committee was properly constituted by a formal resolution of the Commission. I also don't know whether my appointment had gone through the Commission or not. Those are things that left me thinking. However, I became aware later that some commissioners, at least one, Advocate Sipho Mantula, did and does not see the need for the committee at all. I do not know what process was followed to appoint me, as I've said, or the other members of the committee. Some were nominated by selected church groupings, identified by Mrs. Tawum Kwanazi Xaluva, the CRL chair. Others appear to have been simply co-opted by the CRL chair. You go to a meeting and you are a chairperson and there's a new member. And you don't know where she comes from and how she came here. And you dare not ask. New members would arrive at meeting without explanation or consultation with myself. My only formal dealings were with the CRL chair, who appointed me as the chair, but who in practice exercised complete control over the committee and all its meetings. I was also deeply troubled when I learned that the chair of the COCTA Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, had expressed serious unease about the Section 22 process. I was shown correspondence confirming that the 2018 COCTA Portfolio Committee, this correspondence was shown to me by Dr. Zweli Mkhize, report had expired and was never adopted by Parliament, thereby removing any legal basis for the reviving of its recommendations. The CRL chair, when this was drawn to her attention, she dismissed it completely and entirely and stated that no one could tell her or the CRL Rights Commission what to do. Despite the chair's repeated statements to the media that she was handing over the process to the committee and that the CRL executive would only play a logistical and secretarial role, from the beginning there were procedural irregularities and undue interference by the CRL chair in particular. Despite my letter of appointment stating clearly that I was to call and preside over meetings, this never occurred. The CRL chair, through what she calls the secretariat that is headed by the CEO, Mr. Mafadza, of the CRL, called every meeting. Even at one stage when I wrote a letter to say, I think we need a meeting now, and this is the draft agenda. Can the secretariat then write letters which I will sign? That was dismissed. So I was also invited to meetings. The CRL chair, through what she calls secretariat, that is headed by the CEO of the CRL, called every meeting. She chaired most of them, often for extended periods. The agenda were drawn up by the commission or the secretariat, and I had no input on them. The Secretariat operated under the authority of the CRL executive. I never presided over a single meeting from beginning to the end. And this means that my repeated attempts to establish the independence of the committee from the CRL chair and the commission were not allowed to take effect. How it would happen is that she would come in the beginning of every meeting and talk for an hour or 2 or 3, and then leave it to me to find my way, not knowing where we are with the agenda. I thought I found it very embarrassing, actually. Toxic, exclusionary, and intimidating process. I also learned from the committee members' admissions to me that there were private meetings taking place between the CRL chair and some selected members, some kind of cabal, outside of the formal committee meetings. Somebody that becomes very much mentioned because he also confirmed to me, Dr. Reverend John Maloma, who says he represents TIASA, relayed such information to me at least once or maybe even twice. When I confronted him about his rudeness to me every time I got a small chance to chair a meeting of the Section 22 Committee. This explained the strong synchrony between the CRL chair's stated preferences and the positions consistently advanced by a small inner circle within the committee, particularly on matters related to regulation and legislative control. You could say that they hold other meetings somewhere when they come to meetings, to the committee meetings. And maybe that's why she always wanted to chair the meetings. And then I would sit like Pastor Brett here, sometimes for 2 days, saying nothing. Committee meetings, my research was ignored. My questions were dismissed. My leadership role was very hollow. Committee meetings became increasingly toxic. Those who questioned the direction of the committee were marginalized or attacked. Entire sectors of Christianity, particularly the Pentecostals and charismatic churches, were treated with open suspicion and hostility. The SACC also expressed its reservations about the process. As a result, the document released on 19 December 2025 was hurriedly finalized in meetings chaired by the CRL chair in an apparent attempt to, as she said, preempt an anticipated public announcement by the SACC, which was expected to express its unease with the Section 22 Committee. That came from Mr. Reverend Maloma, that the SACC was planning to do this, to distance itself from the CRL and the Section 22 Committee. And so she called a hurried meeting and sat there as they were writing, and she was saying, no, write this there, no, you can't write that there, no, put it like this, and so on. For 2 days, and I was not allowed to say anything. So I sat like he's sitting here for 2 days, only standing up to go to the toilet, come back and listen. It was December 17 and 18. I was alarmed by continued discussion about excluding so-called disruptive elements, or having by invitations only consultations, and by proposals to involve the SAPS, including references to policing and use of force against the disruptive elements, and even tear gas where necessary, to prevent dissenting voices from participating. Although I was present in the room, as I've said, I could not participate as the atmosphere was just too toxic to do so. On the third day, I opted to go back to my province of KZN by the sea. And after telling the chair that I did not see any reason to stay as I had no role to play in the drafting of the Section 22 document titled Final Draft Christian Sector Self-Regulatory Framework in South Africa. The document itself was never presented to the full Section 22 committee, so this was a small writing team. So it was never authorized to go out by the full Section 22 committee, but they hurriedly took it out because they feared that the SACC was about to do something. I must also address claim made repeatedly in public by the chair that the Section 22 committee represents 45 million Christians in South Africa. Based on my direct experience as purported by the chair, I do not believe this claim can be factually supported. As the work of the committee progressed, it became increasingly clear that significant Christian structures and constituencies were excluded, either by design or by consequence, and that the committee could not credibly claim to speak for the breadth and diversity of Christianity in South Africa. In particular, while Reverend Maloma sat on the committee claiming to represent TIASA, and while he actively supported the CRL chair's regulatory agenda and mandate, this representation was his representation was formally repudiated by TIASA's own constituency. 3 of the largest and most significant denominations that together constitute the majority of TIASA's membership and footprint, namely the AFM, Assemblies of God, and Full Gospel Church, wrote formally and unequivocally to renounce both TIASA's position and its participation in the Section 22 committee, and any claim that TIASA was representing them in this process. So he's not representing TIASA, but he's close to the chair. In addition, the South African Council of Churches, historically one of the most significant and broadly representative Christian bodies in our country, is not formally part of the Section 22 committee. They came only once, and then they left, so they're not there. Charismatic Christians are formally viewed as enemies of the CRL in the Section 22 committee. In one of my advisory notes to the chair of the CRL, I expressed my discomfort about the CRL's apparent us versus them approach to the brief and work of the Section 22. I even wrote some short paper that said you cannot have the doctrine of us versus them in Christ for all falling under one body of Christ. But she became very unhappy with that. Unfortunately, the terms of reference of the Section 22 committee keep changing almost daily. I was surprised during the launch event of the committee on the 2nd of October 2025, where I was required to read the terms of reference to the audience. And I had the terms of reference that were in my letter of appointment. So I had them, I took them, and I was going towards the stage. While I was on my way to the podium to speak and holding the terms of reference which are contained in my letter of appointment, a CRL official hurriedly gave me a new set of terms of reference to read out to the public and to comment about them. Well, I'm a creative writer, but sometimes it becomes very embarrassing when you read a sentence and you don't know what the next sentence is saying. That was embarrassing to me, even a bit dishonest on their part, because those new terms of reference were signed by the chairperson of the CRL Commission. So I had to read them. But things that were there, I was seeing them for the first time. And this is October, and I've been there since the 15th of April, and I've been working on using these terms of reference, trying to be an honest man, maybe. Taken together, these realities reveal a serious representational deficit at the heart of the process. One cannot credibly claim to represent tens of millions of Christians while excluding major denominations, proceeding without the SACC, marginalizing the Pentecostals and charismatic churches, and dismissing dissenting voices as disruptive elements. I also got taken aback with some racist remarks during the writing on the 17th and 18th. I must also place on record my profound shock and dismay at the racist and defamatory language used in meetings by the chair, especially that meeting, to describe critics of her agenda. There is one, Mr. Michael Swain, who is Executive Director of Freedom of Religion, South Africa, FORSA. He was referred to as the white man from England, who came from England to South Africa in 1983 to enjoy apartheid. Well, I was not aware of that. When they presented their document, or soon thereafter, Reverend Maloma repeated this when he and the chair presented that document, that people must not listen to the white man from England who came to South Africa in 1983 to enjoy apartheid. I thought that was in direct conflict with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, which outlaws all forms of racism. Even more disturbing was the chair's personal fixation with Mr. Swain all the time. I was told directly by the CL chair that she had laid criminal charges against him for criminal injury, and that pressure was being exerted on the SAPS via the outgoing Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamil Tabatohi, to ensure his arrest before Christmas, and that she hoped he would be in prison facing 5 years in jail. I was shocked that the chair of a Chapter 9 institution would speak in this way about a citizen whose record really, I think, is very good. Many years to defending the church and religious freedom in South Africa. And defending religious freedom is not only in Michael Swain. Those organizations are found all over the world, similar organizations. I thought maybe from what I heard, she was unhappy that he was busy criticizing this process, of which I was also, as chair, very uncomfortable. Such remarks could be false also, and also offensive. They are also deeply inconsistent with the spirit of our Constitution, and this comes from a constitutional body. As I've said, the final draft document, in November, round about the 9th of November, I was presented with a document titled Final Draft Christian Sector Self-Regulatory Framework in South Africa. I don't know where it came from, but I read it, and I said this was going to create huge problems with the Christian sector, because it already had some kind of regulatory framework that, for example, some strange things. If you go to confess to your pastor, the law must force you as a pastor to reveal to the congregation what Musa Xulu was confessing about, or even go to the police. They also say there's nothing called fivefold ministry. And I said, wow, never heard of it. Its sudden appearance, I don't know from where, shocked me. I warned clearly and unequivocally that the document was not fit for purpose, not scripturally sound, not theologically sound, and constitutionally problematic. I warned that, in my view, it infringed the Constitution. Those warnings were ignored. In fact, I was attacked by certain individuals in the Section 22 Committee. That cabal I spoke about, is 4 of them. There was a newly formed WhatsApp group of the Section 22 Committee, but it was used to attack me for pointing out the loopholes in that document. And Reverend Maloma, as I've said, and I'm not singling out, there is 3 others which I will reveal in court, posted that he had discussed the document with the chair. During the meeting of 17 and 18 December, the CRL chair completely took over the process, usurping my role as chair of the committee. On 19 December, the document was released to the media without even being approved by the full Section 22 Committee. And without my approval as appointed chair, I was supposed to sign that document, sign it off. I was excluded from meaningful participation on that final day and was not present at the media conference on that day. To date, that final document has not been shared with me as the chair of the Section 22 Committee. It was not given to me. I don't have it. And many were phoning, hey, can you tell us, what is it saying there? I say, I'm busy with Christmas. I don't know that document. Never heard of it. The public and Christian leaders have been calling and writing to me as chairman of the Section 22 Committee, and I have embarrassingly been unable to address the document. Why am I resigning? I have done everything within my power to discharge my duties faithfully and in line with my appointment. However, I can no longer serve as chair of a committee, the processes of which I do not control, the outcomes of which I do not endorse, and the existence of which is being used as I'm being used as a front with no powers. But there's a predetermined agenda, and I don't know where it comes from. And that explains why the chair takes most of the time chairing that committee, and I sit like Pastor Bert here. To remain would compromise my integrity. I'm an ordained and commissioned minister of the word and sacraments. My loyalty is to the Great Commission commanded by Christ Jesus in Matthew 28, verses 19 to 20. I must also point out that the church history tells us that the church has, in all free societies and democratic societies, been self-regulating for its entire existence over the past 2,000 years. The church knows how to self-regulate. Even under very extreme circumstances, in the year 312, when Emperor Constantine, 325 AD, tried to get involved with the church, which had prayed for him to win some battle. He asked the bishops to meet in Nicaea and draft the Nicaean Creed. It was never drafted by outsiders. It has always been insiders. And even those that complained later, Martin Luther, 1517, was dealing with the Pope and the church structures and had to go out and start a new movement, the Protestant movement, internally. It has never been the function of the state to regulate the church, except in a few occasions where church and state are one. There are countries like that. For these reasons, I hereby tender my resignation as chairperson of the Section 22 Committee, which I'm doing with immediate effect. Okay, I resigned on Monday, and I sent the letter this morning because I have been really thinking about this since the 19th of December, where I felt so humiliated. Not for the first time. Not for the first time. The entire relationship has been toxic. So I went home, I went to my church, I asked them to pray for me. I needed a solution. I got the solution to resign. It was only a matter of when. Today, confirmed. I thank you very much. Context, when they ask questions. I have, obvious reasons, copied this letter of resignation to President Ramaphosa, to the Speaker of Parliament, Mrs. Tokodidiza, to the CRL Rights Commission, to Minister Velenkosini Hlabisa, to the Chairperson of the NCOP, and to the Chair of the COCTA Portfolio Committee, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. So that gives a context. The letter is already at those levels.
Good morning. My name is Tato. I am from News 24. I have, quite a few questions for you, Reverend Xulu. So I was at the 19th of December briefing, and I went through the draft framework. And I wanted to know from you, what should that framework have looked like if you disagree with aspects of it? Because when I went back through it, I didn't see the mention of the confessions must be disseminated to the congregation and sent to SAPS. I mean, maybe it wasn't something that I didn't have eyes to that you might have, but I just wanted some clarity on that. And also, as far as I understand, it's a draft framework that, further consultations are expected in the future. I guess I can understand if your main reason for leaving the committee was, the toxic environment. So I wanted to see how much you agreed or disagreed with the contentions within the framework. And I guess from that, was the Section 22 committee not to create guidelines for self-regulation? Because I don't think it's controversial to say that there's quite a bit of, child abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse taking place in churches across the country. And, which I take as a sign that clearly more needs to be done, and clearly the self-regulation of the churches in the way that it's been happening before is inadequate. So I guess I wanted your comment on that and where the purpose of the Section 22 committee was going to be going. That's everything from me. Thank you.
No, thank you, Tato. About some of the doctrinal issues, which may not be in that document, is what was being discussed. That the final outcome must look like this. The doctrine of confession of sins must be interfered with. For example, and the issues of fivefold ministry must be interfered with. The document should have started by acknowledging the scriptural basis of church regulation. You go through the scriptures, and then you quote those verses that relate to regulation of behavior and all of that. In the epistles, those letters written by the apostles, you find a lot of that. Sometimes they even contradict. But it's there because it's dealing with the Christian sector. So you start with the scriptures. Then you go to church history. How has regulation of churches happened over the past 2,000 years? It starts right from the first chapter of the book of Acts, when they elected the replacement of Judas Iscariot. Then it goes on and on and on. And as I say, it's a lot of it, even outside of the scriptures. You will then go to the Apostles' Creed, where the apostles were themselves trying to regulate how to believe what is heresy and what is acceptable. When do you see someone that has gone off? Jesus Christ himself warns about false prophets, but he didn't say that governments must regulate and pass laws against false prophets. He warned and told us how to deal with false prophets as his followers. So you find that. Then you can go to the Creed of Nicaea, which was started in the year 325 and took 56 years to complete. because the bishops and the theologians and everybody, they had their own opinions. And these are people who are knowledgeable from experience and position and so on. And the bishops, of course, come directly from the scriptures, and theologians always come from time to time through reading and so on. It took 56 years to complete. Now, you want to regulate because some pastor there has been touching the buttocks of women, and you want to pass a law overnight. It took 56 years for one creed to be completed by the church itself. And then you go to 1054, when the year 1054, when the Eastern Orthodox and the Orientals left the Roman Catholic Church. It was on the basis of misunderstandings of internal issues by internal people. Then you go to 1517, Martin Luther. That is the church itself doing its own work. It does not need outsiders. Then what happens? He gives birth to the Protestant movement. All these churches now called mainline churches, from one person who objected internally in the church, not from a counselor or some minister of education or some speaker of parliament objecting or some commission of some sort. One person, an insider, Professor Martin Luther. Then gives birth to all. Then later you get the Pentecostals coming out of excitement, and then the Great Revival. And then in South Africa and in Africa you get the African-initiated churches. And then after that, with the Great Revival of the 40s and 50s, we then have the charismatics now. That is, I thought we would acknowledge that kind of church history so that we don't attack Pentecostals and attack charismatics outside of the church history context. God is today speaking through the charismatic churches. And then we deal with that. And then we deal with theological issues. How does God call people? Some people say God does not talk to anyone and so on. God does. In my studies, I went through a long essay paper called Hearing the Voice of God. How to hear it. And that takes you even to the prophetic ministry. So you hear all these comments being made by people without clarifying the issues of theology. I thought that document should have had that clarified. And then lastly, the doctrinal issues. There are 42 to 50,000 denominations, Christian denominations in the world today. In South Africa, it's more close to 10,000 or maybe roundabout. How do you have one kind of regulation over people who are so diverse? How do you achieve it? So you can see that it's complicated. The issue of talking about abuses is fine. Actually, I've never spoken to any pastor or any church leader who said we should not talk about it. It's something that the church should have a look at. But I became convinced in November when they presented me with that document that this was really out of order. Thank you.
Can I add?
No. Thank you very much, colleagues. These are my former enemies. So there's no Kapali here. I was surprised to meet them this morning. I said, wow. You know, because I say, wow, the Lord has his own ways of solving problems. So, but I really said to Pastor Mkhuba, I've been for the past maybe 10, 12 years wanting her to pray for me. I even wanted to come to your church in Soweto. And then there was this little marches and so on and so on. And they say, Xulu is evil. I say, all right, we'll meet one day. And then the Lord just brings this together. So there's no cabal. This thing has not been spoken about before here. But there's nothing between me and Mrs. Togo Kaluva beyond what I've said. I'm not capable of intimidating anyone. I think I have 2,455 enemies, fully armed. I walk the streets because the Lord looks after me. She has security and all of those things. I did not wake up today to say there's a problem. Ever since I started there, I have been WhatsApping her to say I have a problem. The first confrontation happened in June. The last Friday of June was 27, 26, 25, June 24. That was the first confrontation. Because she wanted me to stop highlighting these things about collaborative approach, sharing my research with stakeholders, and so on. And she was clear that these people must not know what we are doing. I said, but I come from an academic background. Your peers are very important. They guide you when you get out of the way. So you can't just think privately and secretly. I even said, working secretly, I'm not used to it. I've never heard of it. So that was in June. The second was in September or something. I was invited by the Apostolic Faith Mission to address their conference in Durban in my capacity as chairperson. And she said, no, you can't go there. We're not going to entertain your private beliefs and so on, because they wanted me to tell them, what is this whole thing we are doing about? So it's not like, then I started in October to say, it looks like I'm going to have to quit this in writing. And on the 9th of November, I put it in a long letter to her to say, based on A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I don't think I belong here. But maybe I can give it a chance. But I don't think I fit in here. So it's not like I woke up and when there was that whole story on the 17th, 18th, 19th, I then went home to sit down with my advisors and everybody and to tell them that I think, because I really disagree with that document, it has got no theological basis. It has no basis of church history, understanding what regulation, how the church works. It has no ecclesiological considerations. When are they going to start studying the church and how it functions before they want to regulate it? So I came to the conclusion that I should resign. So it's got nothing to do with her personally, but I think we just don't agree on as they say. I have never agreed. That's why I've been writing paper after paper and share with so-and-so. What do you think, Professor so-and-so? And others say, no, you're stupid, as academics always do. But we accept it. And then some write me long feedbacks. One even said, constitutionally, you cannot have a law that, for example, addresses only one section of the population, especially when it comes to criminal law. He's a professor of law, and he wrote a long, and because I said, this is what I think, but I'm not sure also. He said, no, you can't do it. Then he cited, case law, that it can't work. Then I shared it. Then there was no feedback, but it's okay. But there's nothing personal. There comes a time when you simply have to move on. I decided that it's time for me to move on and, pay attention to other issues in our country, as there's a lot of issues that we have to address. But I couldn't continue there because, one, nobody was listening to me. Secondly, my research was being ignored. Thirdly, you go to a meeting, you tell yourself you're a chairperson, and somebody comes and sits right here and says, okay, Reverend Prof, okay, no, it's me now. And for 2 days you are sitting here. I have nothing personally, but man has also what is called dignity. You have to protect your dignity. Yeah. There's nothing to beg for. I go to my church, I preach, and I have a large network of theologians, and now my former enemies are also now going to start calling me and so on. But I can't sacrifice my dignity and my integrity working on something which is draining my energy. But also at the same time, I know it's not going to get anywhere. It won't get anywhere. Zero.
Good question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Khomotsa Omudise from Eyewitness News. I just have a couple of questions as well, mostly for you, Reverend Xulu. You've answered my first question a bit in the last round. Why did you accept the invite to be part of this committee? Because what the committee was set out to do had been widely explained from the time that we had been covering, from all the times that I've covered the CRL and their mandate and what they believe should happen. So I'm very interested in why you why you accepted this invite. And it seems to me like the Damascus moment for you was at the point where you were being sidelined and not allowed to do your work. That's what it's coming across as. So why did you accept it? You're saying the church has always been self-regulating. I presume that's a view that you've always held. Why did you want to be part of a process that wants to regulate the church if you believe it's been self-regulating already? That's my first one. My second question for you is, you speak about the chairperson of the CRL intimidating people with police. I don't know if I'm misquoting you, Reverend, please forgive me. But, oh, okay, please just clarify that for me. I got a sense that there's been intimidation from the part of the chairperson. Who is she or who are they intimidating in particular, specifically? And then, just in terms of the Pentecostals and the Charismatics, I want to make sure that I have it right. Is the sentiment from the CRL subliminally or overtly that the Charismatics and the Pentecostals and the Evangelicals are the perpetrators of these atrocities? So does the CRL hold the view that the Charismatics and the Pentecostals are the problem here and they need to be regulated? And then loosely at some point, Reverend, as well as Apostle, you've been speaking about court, but I'm not aware of a matter that's currently in court or if you are going to court. If you are going to court, what are you going to challenge the draft framework? Yes, I heard mention of court. So are we challenging the draft framework, especially because you say that it had to be signed with your name and you were not part of it? So are we challenging the framework, or what are we heading to court to specifically do? Thank you so much.
Can I go? Thank you, Professor. I just have one question. From your experience as the now former chairman of the section, I'm Skalk Strauss. I'm from the Boodskapper. I just wanted to know, it seems like it, and I just want your reaction to it, that the Christian sector is being signaled out, that there is a certain bias against the Christian sector as a whole. What would be your response as a former chairman of the Section 22 Commission on that?
My name is Malume Malafane from the Pan-African Social Justice Alliance. Professor Xulu, the mandate of the Section 22 Committee was to go and consult with various churches, religious formations, and other bodies. According to you, do you think the whole process was going to be transparent and that the outcome of that process was not predetermined. And I'm saying that judging from the tone of Ms. Xaluva, Dr. Maloma and others, that there was some insistence that religion should be regulated. And from where you are, do you think the outcome of those consultations that Mr. Xaluva in particular would have accepted a different result, that religion should not be regulated based on what religious formations, communities, and other churches are saying? Secondly, you mentioned that from when you were appointed that the terms of reference kept changing. What would you say, what were the fundamental changes or the major changes that happened from those terms of references? And you also say the tone when it comes to those terms of references was that there should be self-regulation that has no influence whatsoever from the state. And that, I'm saying that because during all the meetings, Section 22 meetings, you have also alluded to that Mr. Xaluva was always the chairperson. And from where we are, you are supposed to be the chairperson if it was really an independent process, an independent committee from the state, and also Section 22 committee. So in your terms of reference, what were the fundamental changes that happened from when you were appointed and also later on? Thank you.
Shlonim Timkulu from ENCA again. Just a follow-up or a question that wasn't answered. I just want for clarity. I understand that it's not a personal thing against the CRL Rights chairperson, but her name keeps popping up. Is anyone else within the CRL Rights Commission on the radar, or is there anyone else that is seen as problematic, if I can use that word? Because it does seem that the problem is being pointed at one person in particular. And then besides the committee meetings where the chair is said to have taken over, was there actual work that was done by the Section 22 committee? My colleague talks about the consultations that were meant to happen with the churches. So was there actual work that was done besides the sort of vibes, if I can put it that way, that we're picking up were happening when these committee meetings were happening? And then I don't know if, Prof, you can let us know, in your statement you talk about that new members were being brought into meetings that weren't part of the committee initially. Are you able to give us some details about who those people were and how that even happened?
Thank you, Prof. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. On the issue of intimidation, the answer relates to what was being discussed in order that the disruptive elements do not have access to the hearings. So then there would be police, for example, and the people would go there by invitation only, and all of those things. So some of the people, even when we went to launch there, were feeling that the presence of the police was intimidating stakeholders. That was the context I used, intimidation. And then the issue of targeting Pentecostals and so on. Yeah, not generally, even when you hear even some of the questions there, especially the charismatics. Let me start by saying, church history has a thing that says, every time something new happens, society becomes very skeptical in every era. I mean, Martin Luther was really attacked, like almost physically, as a heresy, as somebody who was misleading the church. But look at what happened. You have all these Methodists and all these mainline churches that came out of one person deciding to hear the voice of God and bow down in front of the Great Commission to say, in the church that is overregulated like the Roman Catholic Church, it's not going to be possible for the Great Commission to be fulfilled. Now let's go there, out to the people. But when the Pentecostals also came, they became a laughing stock. And when the African independent churches came, they became a laughing stock. We grew up in KZN being told that Shembe tried to fly to heaven. And he fell down and died because he thought he had wings. So you always have these things. Then now the charismatics. I would say sometimes they come up with some methodologies that the mainline church and conservative churches are not familiar with. And so they get easily targeted as if they are the enemies of Christianity. But I'm telling you, and I've prophesied, the next generation is going to be children taking over leadership of the church. And everybody will laugh at children. And they'll say, wow, who do they think they are? These are demons. These are demons. So it happens like that. That's why I was emphasizing that we have to go through church history to understand, not just write a document from your own opinions and so on, without creating a sound context from the Christian sector and how it functions. So there is, whenever you hear about these regulations, there's an undertone of targeting Pentecostals and charismatics. They even believe some of the things that are generated by AI, like those pastors you see on Facebook. They believe that no, this is the devil in action. So that's how terrible it is. Not only at CRL. Remember, those people at CRL are not theology or church people. It's called they are lay people. So they're dealing with a subject which is actually very complicated, although because of its presence in society, it may look very simple. It's a very complicated subject, the entirety of Christian faith. The issue of court, no, it's not me going to court. I'm not going to any court. Yes. So I'm just saying that if they drag me to court as a former chairperson, I will then say other things there. But, So you find those things. There are court cases. I think there are two or three. Two court. Very, very, very. Some of them actually have cited the president. That's why I read all that list, and Zolimkis and everybody. I think I've answered you. Which was? If you believe the church self-regulates, why did you go? No. I wanted to read you because you see. This letter formally confirms your appointment as the chairperson of the CRL Rights Commission, Section 22 Ad Hoc Committee for the Christian Sector, effective 15 April 2025. Your appointment is in line with Section 22(1) and 2 of the CRL Rights Commission Act 19 of 2002. Your responsibilities as chairperson include conduct extensive research, that's me, to assess the scale and impact of abuses of people's beliefs and harmful religious practices in eroding the religious rights of Christian religious believers, especially where monitoring is slack or absent. That's research. I love research. Calling and presiding over the Section 22 Ad Hoc Committee, that never happened. Consulting with the Secretariat about Section 22 ad hoc committees, any other committees that will come in future, as well as engage in provincial engagements with religious leaders. That was stopped. It never happened. When I started saying, hey, they want me in KZN Council of Churches and so on, it became a problem. So it never happened. But I was already inside, and I complained about it. Diligently and competently carrying out the roles and responsibilities of the Section 22 Committee as set out in the terms of reference. Terms of reference. Neither in terms of reference of the Section 22 Committee. Attend and participate in Section 22 ad hoc committee meetings and provincial engagement with religious leaders. Undertake, that is all members are expected to do. Undertake provincial consultations with religious leaders in the Christian sector. Develop mechanisms and strategies to deal with issues in the religious sector, especially by promoting and protecting the rights of the Christian believer while ensuring that religious freedom is maintained in line with the Constitution. Make recommendations aimed at promoting, I must make recommendations, peer review mechanisms. Peer review is already happening, it's been happening for a long. In your own denomination, your co-pastors are your peers, and they guide you. So I would not have run away from that. In the religious sector, with emphasis on curbing spiritual transgressions. And then feedback with provincial leaders. So I was expected to go to provinces and give them feedback and so on. It never happened. Okay, that's a letter signed. See? Yeah, but it was only 25th of April. I say, this is good. So when I was going to stage with these terms of reference to read, an official comes, hey. The committee will conduct consultations with all religious sectors and organizations throughout the country about development of the legislative framework. Did you hear the legislative framework in that first letter? So, yeah. Which include the establishment of Religious Practice Council, representative of all religious sectors, denominations, registration of religious institutions according to the diverse religious sectors and denominations, registration of religious practitioners according to the diverse religious sectors. Now you see, this I see for the first time, and the cameras are looking at me. Yeah, and I have this, which is what was said to me. And it's in writing. You see? And then we come back. I sent her back this letter. Do you remember this letter of appointment and what it said? There was no reply. So it's not a war against anybody. I'm just saying. And then development of code of conduct and code of ethics for all religious practitioners. Engage with state departments and facilitate the development of the legislative framework, as mentioned about. Now, you don't have to go to my primary school to note that the terms of reference that had been given to me are different from these terms of reference. And I'm already inside. So what do? I send the letter, which is which. So you can see all these things. Nobody's really creating stories against anybody. I did say that the terms of reference kept changing all the time. The terms of reference that are there now are different from the two that I have read. Did I answer you? In terms of, as you saw in my letter, it is Section 22 Committee for the Christian sector. So it's not for the religious sector as a whole. You remember, it's a cultural, religious, and linguistic, but we go to religious, we pick up one sector. Yeah, so that's called targeting. Yes. Did I answer you? Okay. The issue of social justice you said something about transparency, and yeah, my interaction, I really became slightly more unhappy and unsettled when a document that eventually became released on the 19th of December came from nowhere. And I know a little bit of things, about a lot, not much. But I started suspecting, as anyone would do, that this document has been written somewhere else and is being pushed through the cabal. And at least one member of the cabal was able to, out of, as I said, that tell me that no. They actually met with the chairperson somewhere and spoke, and I was seen as blocking, But I told them that because they've already written things, like the regulations that we are talking about, foreign pastors must be like this, and they must not be allowed in the country, and all of that. I say, but there's something called apostolic mission. What do you do when we are in Uganda and the Lord sends you to South Africa? So I was asking myself all these questions, saying maybe there's something that I don't understand, but I think my understanding of theology is more or less balanced. So there was a problem with all of those, the things that they had written there. For example, the charismatics, you see, in the missionary era, the missionaries were establishing communities with a school, a church, and even a clinic, and a new culture of doing things. Abandon the old, take the new culture. When it comes to the newer churches, they go to hotels. That's where they worship. They worship in schools. They worship. Now, suddenly, that is going to be not allowed. So you can't worship. You must only worship at a church building, which you must organize money to build. And then after that, so that visitation to you, you must have a fixed address as a church. But when you are in the sector, you know that the focus is on the message, evangelization. So you meet with these people that are available this week in a school. You go to somewhere else. You meet in a hotel and all of that. So I was looking at all of these talks that they were having, and I said, there's going to be a problem here. Because the over-regulation now is going to begin to deal with SALCA, local government issues. It's going to start mobilizing the whole country against the Christian church. And I thought this was going to be problematic. So I really, that's why I rejected the document. I thought, no, you can't have this document. And then subsequently, then she took over again. And then she ran it like literally. And I wrote in my resignation letter, which because maybe, I know it's all over now. If you are aware, you would have noticed that when you took over the chair of the writing team meeting, which you said was a Section 22 committee meeting, which it was not, you drove a hard spear down my lungs. You simply pushed me aside, took over the chair, and directed the writing or editing of the document, and eventually released it without taking the document to the Section 20. I wrote it there to her. So you sit here and you're a pastor. You have all sorts of degrees, and sometimes they get angry when I say, I have 3 doctoral degrees. And so all of that. And then you sit here on one of the subjects that you know very well. And somebody just takes over. For 2 days, you're sitting quietly like him. And you're well dressed like him. You even decided, no, man, I must really take this guy out and put a suit. Maybe they'll take me seriously. That's humiliating. You cannot use a government or public office to humiliate people. That should never be allowed in this country. We have those kinds of people that because they're there for 5 years or whatever, and maybe they not even finish that, will humiliate everybody. So suddenly professors are nothing because you have a position. Oh, what kind of a country is this? So I said that. And you said something about religion, which was, I've said already that I think the focus was on Christian sector here. It's going to be difficult to deal with other religions for obvious reasons, because the Christian sector is a liberatory kind of religion. It liberates people. It's very free, actually. But try with Judaism and see what will happen, or Muslims, or others, it's going to be very difficult. I'm just saying, this is what worried me. It still worries me even now. And I'm expecting a lot of confusion, but as for my single self, I'm a free man. Freedom has come to me because I've come out of, I know professors of theology at university. Suddenly I was not allowed to talk to them. I know Professor Kumalo, he hates the CRL. You can't talk to Professor. But I've known Professor Kumalo for the past 30 years. No, we can't talk. I am a free man. Fresh air. I don't know, did I answer all the questions?
Sorry, there was another question there. Will you just rephrase and refresh the memory here?
So I asked, just for clarity again, I keep asking this, is the chair of the CRL Rights Committee the only person?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because her
No.
name keeps popping up. And then Prof, you did mention that in the meetings that other people were being broken that were not part of the committee.
Oh, yeah.
Who are those people? How did that happen? And was any actual work done?
Say that in English, the last sentence.
So was any actual work done by the Section 22 committee besides the meetings that were happening that were being chaired by the chair yeah?
No, it's fine. Let me start with the last one. No, there was no work done. They came in on the 1st of October when we launched there. They were not there. I was there doing the things that are supposed to be doing the things that are written in my letter of appointment. You remember research, talking to religious sector and so on and so on. It was difficult to get them early because I think there was a selective process to meet with his church and not with his church. And then while they were planning to go and meet with his church, then somebody in his church says something, then they take another route. So it took from April to end of September because it was a very selective process. And so certain people were excluded and had to be excluded because of how it was working. So when they came, she took them through orientation, and then we went to the launch. That in the launch, I thought in orientation maybe I will present one of my research findings. And it wasn't. Then in the launch, that my role was to read the terms of reference, which I had, but then there was a whole new set. And then after the launch, I wrote saying that I think we need 2 days of orientation of these people. Because, you see, some of the churches there are not entirely Christian. ZCC, the Shembe, which are all the factions are represented there, 5, 6 factions. They are not entirely Christian, and their orientation is very different. Yeah, their doctrines are, it's a combination of culture, a little bit of religion, a little bit of, and maybe 5% Christianity. Some of them don't read the New Testament at all. And some of them say that, the church was started in Nazareth before Christ was there. So you find all of those. So there was a problem of that. So that we can talk with one voice, I proposed that what happened was that it was simply ignored. That's when I was told that no, you can't call meetings here. We will call meetings for you. And there were no minutes taken. So there are no minutes. The one time I took minutes, and when I read them back, I was asked, who said you must take the minutes? So, but I know I'm not playing victim. I'm not playing victim. I'm just saying, slowly, I started realizing that this thing was not what I thought it was. And then there was a question about Mrs. Xulu. No. That's a one-person show, all of it. Even those many recordings you find in TikTok and so on of her talking about it, it's only her who talks. So that's why her name, everybody is mentioning. I don't even know other members. Some I knew them before, like Advocate, because in my other life I'm also a political analyst. So I know Advocate Mandola and so on and so on. But other members, I don't know them. I've never met them. We've never sat in one room. So the reason why I think people keep on talking about her is because that is her that is running the show. That's how it is. And I don't think that people are hating her and so on. They don't know who else is a member of that commission. I also don't know.
Thank you so much.